Lorena de crítica concreta.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks for inviting me, and that's the third time I come in Porto because it's like I really like the place and the weather. I'm sorry for my English because I will not be so technical, but tonight I will try to explain you how we start with the project when we were 20 years old, and we start with the festival. Then we did another project called ACLAB that I will present you, and now after these two projects, we developed our society because we begin as a non-profit organization, and 2 months ago we start to be an enterprise, social enterprise, to follow the work we did. So Bellastock, it just started when in 2006. So the idea was just to be an architecture student, but without touching materials. So it was strange for us to do this career without working with the people who really produce our architecture. So we started a project. It was a festival. It's really simple. The people come, we give a kit of material, and they lived inside of the construction. And the last day, we just unbuilt all the city. So now I will show you the different work we did. The first year we used wood, and it was a problem for us because we just spend material without reusing. So the question was how to keep the material after the 4 days of experience, and we start with pallets and say, okay, let's give it back to the guy who just gave us. But the important thing in that process is the articulation, how to fix each element together without touching the element, so the guy just can take it back because it's you took care of his material. So the year after, in 2009, in 2010, we just began to invite more people from the Paris Architecture School, and we worked about the same construction. As you can see, the people just realized this one was really heavy for only 2 days of living inside, but at the end of the event, we just cut the back, and the sand just came back to the floor. And it was the beginning of finding a site really related with the subject we worked on. In 2011, the project was continuing to grow. So here in that inflate city, you have 1,300 people coming from all the schools in France. So we start to go out of Paris and to invite more people. And there were also students from different schools in Europe. And so you will see that it get an impact then, because Bellastock was developed in different countries. For the workshop, it's simple. When they arrive, we give them a kit of material for each school, and then we try to inflate the city, because of course the motor who inflate the city just explode the second day of the city. So we just had a friend who have a motor, so we just took out the wire and fixed the motor with the ventilator, and the motor just ran 1,500 kilometers, but he inflated all the city. So we were lucky that the guy just had a motor. And that was the view inside of the city. It was a simple membrane from outside inside. I mean, it was really poetic. Maybe not the most ecological we did. So the years after, in 2012, we decided to work about garbage. And before people come, you see that light. We did it with some material from an old factory. You will see that it has importance in Bellastock, because after 2012 we start to work about reusing material. So at the end of my presentation, I will show you how we work with the construction. So the event is quite simple, 1,000 people, and we gave them some wood, carpet, whatever we found around Paris. And that's the result after 2 days. Of course, the political and the people who contract us for the project, they really unlike it. Because it was really an aesthetic, but it wasn't our problem. We don't care about aesthetic in Bellastock. We just walked about how to take something from the garbage and give him another life by creativity and inventivity. So it wasn't so bad for us. In 2013, we walked about architecture and a life structure, and we just gave this sort of material to each participant. They built their own shelter, and the last day we just plant the structure, and then the plant just grow on it after 3 or 2 years. In 2014, we walked about architecture and water, and we did that project called Water Wall. We did it in France and also in China at the same time. And it wasn't exactly a floating city, it was an amphibie city. So by day we were on water, by night on the floor. And as you can see on the photo, each element is fixed with rope. That was, I told you at the beginning of the presentation, it's just because we want to keep all the wood. We already designed a building done with that wood, so people can use it, but they don't have to cut it, screw it, or they have to keep the element the best they can. So some view of the water wall time. In 2015, we walked about mobility. It wasn't a really good idea. I will explain why. So each group has his own kit, like always, and they had to make 3 kilometers way before going to the next place, and they rebuilt their own shelter. So that's the different participants moving their own shelter. But the problem was for us, because we had to move in one night all the kitchen, toilets, shower, sand for a concert. So in that image you have the kitchen. Each element got white, so we can move it in 3 hours. I mean the cooker, they have to cook for 1,000 people. So you have to give the dinner on 8 at night and give the breakfast at 9 in another site, 3 kilometers. So it's like each element was really thinking as a mobility. Here you have a beautiful roof, which is not working because the rain just goes there and goes on the cooker. So the cooker were really unhappy about that roof, but for Instagram it's really good. Then in 2016 we wanted to change. It was our 10 years anniversary project, and we decided to change a bit and not building shelter, but walking about public space. So we did a kind of city for the builders. So here you have the camping. It was scaffolding 4 floors. So here you have 400 people living there. Here you have all the building shop, and here is the restaurant. And we asked people to walk about the space around. So we spent 2 months, it's close to the canal in the north of Paris, it's called Canal de l'Ourcq. And we spent 2 months to study which person were using the space, going to them and ask, are you doing sports, you're doing a garden, blah, blah, blah. And we collect all the information. And we asked the student not to build the shelter, but to build something related with the information we collect. So it was for us the beginning of what we call transitory urbanism, because the different structure you see, they just let it for 3 months. We didn't demolish it after 4 days, and during 3 months we saw the different uses, which one is good or not. For example, this one is not good because there is runner here, bicycle is dangerous, blah blah blah. So we quit. But for example, this one, which is a boat station, they wanted to keep it. So it's like a way to do urbanism and to try it during 3 months, and then you can implement the urbanistic project and get information more closer to the resource, the people who live there. And of course, you have project. After 4 days, we just quit it. It was too dangerous. It was a good idea. In 2017, we walked about architecture and earth. Why? Because around Paris, they want to make a new collective transport, and they will extract 200 millions of earth, 200 millions of ton of earth. And they don't know what to do with that earth, of course. So we say, let's develop a factory, a mobile factory of doing blocks of earth done with that resource. So we just worked with a group called Crater in Grenoble. They're really interesting if you want to follow them. They are the best in France about this earth expertise. And we begin to collect that earth, we transform it in that machine, and we did some block that we gave for the festival. So we did 17,000 blocks of earth for the festival. So as you can see, before the people come, they have blocks of earth and they also have some normal earth to try other techniques, because of course if you use only blocks it's like blah blah blah, like Lego, it's not so interesting. So we try to give them other way to use it. So that's the result. They play with it, of course, during the 4 days. We did a really beautiful Hollywood and that's the map for the, I will show you the map of different day. So here you have the Earth's mountain, and then the block was there between. Then the first day, people do the first wall to make their shelter. The second day, you can see that they begin to walk about collective spaces, like walking in the street. And the third day, the city is completely finished. You have all the program, because we ask people to bring some program to make a real city, to get not only an architecture experiment, but also a social experiment during that 4 days. And then the 4 days you have the, I don't know the name in English, les ruines. And that's the result of after the 4 days. You have all the impact or trace from the city, and all the block, as you can see, we keep it. And now Bellastock is designing a restaurant for people inclusion, like a social restaurant done with all that block. So that's always the same game for Bellastock, is how to play with material but never put it in a bin. In 2018, we worked about suspending city. Quite simple. It was like walking with some click from the track, right? So the trees were the first structure, then we put some click and then some net. And for the roof, we collect some parapente. You know the guy? Okay. So we collect it for the roof. Last year, or this year, in July, we worked about a new material, not a new one, a really famous one in France, because it's like it's a straw. In France, we are producing a lot of cereal, and the straw is the rest of the cereal, and we just don't really use that resource in France. Really, really bad. We use less than 1% of the French production, so it's really a resource that we can begin to put in construction. So we start to work about straw. Something I didn't say before is that during 6 months we worked about that material, inviting people for lecture, trying to get information about it, and people before coming on the really practical thing, they have a theoretical luggage from what we worked. And for example, for melting butt, because butt is the it's not so important. It's a French game of war, and we ask people before coming to work with a model. So it's scale 120, and each group. So on that square, you have 4 groups of 5 people, and we ask them before building together to make a model, and that's the result. So there were like 5,000 boxes of straw, like little boxes, and after they begin to work with it, and of course everybody was trying to make some kind of experiment. That's the game of the festival, the experiment with straw. The good point of that year is that for each 20 students, we invite one professional. So one straw professional was here to accompany, not accompany, but to support and to make a mentoring for the people. So the festival is going better and better for the pedagogical aspect, because as you can see, as the first one, it was like giving material, 4 days, do whatever you want. We don't care. But then, little by little, we invite more professional, and the festival got his pedagogical aspect growing, and the Culture Ministry of France is really looking on it, because they know that it could be a way to learn also architecture. Then, I tell you, the Bellastock just went to other countries, so I will go really quick. We just wrote kind of methodology. They can follow it or not. We don't care. It's just an exchange between different countries. And that's the one, the water world in China. So we did it, of course, with other material, like it was bamboo and water tank. And we mixed a team of Chinese students and European one. Of course, both of them doesn't speak really good English, as I do. So most of the team were really working by drawing, like you are doing now in critical thinking. But I don't say you speak bad English. It's just because it was a Chinese and French student. Then we went to Denmark and we worked with beer crate. It was so cold. Then in Madrid, style, Mexico, Istanbul, Turkey, Chile, Santiago de Chile, Athens, and Canada, Quebec, sorry. And then from that festival, how Bellastock developed a kind of expertise, and how now Bellastock is different. So we begin to as I was explaining you before, the festival began to make a real structure. So we did a lecture before, then there is the experiment, and each year we write a book to explain what we learned during 6 months. From the festival, we learned how to make reusing, how to invite inhabitants to participate in our project, how to make research between how to use art as a tools to develop our city, and how to make exposition, event, and invite people around your project. So the second project, je suis pas trop long là. Non, c'est bon. So the second project I will introduce you is the one we did after the light I showed you in 2012. So ACLAB began in 2012. We are in the north of Paris, and we have a building. They built it in 65. They demolished it in 2013. The building is completely good. I mean, no problem of structure. It's just because there is the pressure of Paris growing. So they just want to build a new project. A really beautiful eco-district with Photoshop green, blah, blah, blah. And the game for us was, okay, don't be so green, but let's try to be the most respectful with the resource, and how to use the old building, which is 60,000 square of industry factory done with concrete, a little bit of iron, but most of the part is concrete, and how to use it as an offer of material and to keep material for the demand, which is the new project. So we had 2 missions for this ACLAB. The first one is to build 6 prototypes for the eco-district done with material from the old building, and the second one is how to open and to make a cultural workshop place. I mean, how to open the place where we do workshop. So the first step is how to analyze the different resources. So for example, the beam, concrete beam, you do a map, then you explain how many you will find, the size, blah, blah, blah. And for each beam, then we try to understand how they demolish it. So you can see the beam is here, and you can see some pieces, and you can make some walk in the park. So it was a good way to keep the material and to use it as a floor. And also, the important thing about that project is that to keep that element, you have to cut the iron and you have to cut les tailleurs de pierre. There is some rock specialist who just make the good size, so you can also keep the material on the territory and invite people from the territory to learn about that construction, and it's how reuse can have a social impact and an economic impact on a project, but I will come back on it. Then other experiments, so we took the iron tubes from the fire network and we did a bridge on it. Then we kept the pillars from the building to make the new landscape arrangement. And then we also invite artists to come in that place and making some opening to show that a workshop place can be an experimental and a nice place to have a walk. So each month we did some walk and people can just discover the ACLAB from different point of view. And it's just some example from designer or artists who came on the place. From that to project, we developed our four
Access?
Well, 4 axes. So there is reusing material, transitory urbanism, some study and research, and also formation and pedagogy. So for reuse, for example, now in the west of France, we just finished to collect all the material from an old caserne, a military place, and we just collect all the stone. So that's the most massive collect we did in Bellastock, and now we are designing all the urban space done with that stone. Of course, we do some opening to the different people from Nantes to make them discover the material we can keep. Just because it's important to explain you that point. Of course, we can make innovation in technique or in reusing material, but as you don't make the same with the cultural aspect, like explaining why reusing can be important and blah blah blah, then it's going to be complicated that people accept some reusing stuff or design. So that's why always in Bellastock we have the technical part and also the cultural or sensibilisation part. C'est un peu compliqué à expliquer. Oh. Another one is we worked about reusing wood. It's not exactly the term, but we bring a kind of mobile cutter of wood, and then to make a stock of wood, we did like we call it architecture de stock, like stock architecture. Is you can stock material really in a stupid way, like tac, but you can also make architecture done with your stock. So that's the point of that project. Is like this wood is in stock, is waiting because you have to be dry, but at the same time that's the place where we give information about the people who want to visit the forest. So it's architecture stock. Another project I wanted to show you is called La Fabrique du Clos, and it's it's a district north of Paris, down in the 70s. It's all done in concrete, and the game was how to collect elements from here and to do new prototype. So the first work is analyze the historical aspect of the building. So you get some images and some details. So for example, you can see that each element got his own part of iron, so you can take it and move it. So it's really easy. So if you want to collect that element, then you just have to study the way they build it, and it became easier to unbuild it. So when you know a bit more about the building, you work with the demolisher and trying to find some solution to collect the element as you want. So we collect some wall from the different districts, and then we begin to cut each element to try to get a new material to do our design. So that's the process. Of course, it's a company coming from the territory, and the result is it's like a place for the bike. So it's a bike garage, and as you can see when you cut it, you can use it as a capla. And this design is like a different way to reuse some concrete wall. And of course, I don't know if I imaged yeah. Of course, the place we also arrange a garden around it. There is a container with a kitchen, so we give the key to the people who live in that district. And during all the summer, they use the place. So it's not only a prototype and scientific place to test things. It's also a place for social interaction, and we get information from what we do. So of course, some of the people from the district really unlike what we did. So we try to arrange, and it's a kind of discussion and dialogue about the different production. Then there is transitory urbanism. So for example, is the ACLAB, the one I show you. Here you have another example of stock architecture. It's the different pillar, and we just stock it to make another space in ACLAB. And bam, 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 we did a building to welcome people on the building site. So this building is 90% from garbage, and that's the view inside. It's just to make exhibition or discussion or just to welcome people and explain the project. We did a new one done with straw and the earth block I showed you before. Là, je suis un peu long. Another project is the one I showed you in 2016, is the mobile lab. So this one, the territory wanted to keep it on the place, and we just built only with modules, like, well, you know that stuff. Yeah. So it goes really quick to move, and it moved during each summer. We move the place. It's a place also where we do construction with inhabitants. We have module to make some. This one is a boat station, and also we do a huge party to make it alive and to present our work. Then research. This part is interesting. Is like how to still we try to continue to develop and to find new process. So one research we did for l'ADEME, which is an environmental organization in France, a really interesting one. They asked us to work about how to reduce the pollution of construction, because as you can know, 70% of the production of garbage is coming from us, builders, architects, promoters. So there is a really huge impact or work we have to do, our generation, to reduce it. So we just produce one research which is called Repart. I don't know if I have a photo, maybe here. But it's in French, and it's about the French law. So maybe, but just to have a look, it's free. It's on internet. It's something that we really want. All our research, they're accessible for other architects or the people who work in architecture. And I will finish with the last one, which is formation and pedagogy, as you are doing here in Critical Concrete. And we worked about, we managed some formation for professional. We also work for children. So here you have an example of doing a workshop per year with some students. And I think I finished. So it was just to let you understand how we start when we were 20 years old as an association. We did the first festival because we wanted to touch material, and then it changed the juridical aspect of Bellastock. But still in France there is some juridical law who permit to be an enterprise or firm, but with a social impact and trying to be as democratic as we can. So thank you for inviting me and for listening me, and I hope you liked. If you have any questions.
I have two questions. How did you manage to claim the spaces of the festivals where you did the interventions, like in terms of permission and stuff like this? Because you had things that were kind of permanent sometimes, right? And second, where does the name Bellastock come from?
So for the first question, for the one in the back, the question was how we had the authorization to find some places to make the festival. So as it was only 4 days, we arrived on the site only 2 weeks before the festival, and we leave 1 week after the festival. So for a municipality, it's only having us 1 month on the place. So they give us, it's called pré-usage. It's like a paper, and you can use the place for 1 month. And if you let it clean, which is our philosophy, we let it cleaner than as we use it before. So then the municipality knows about our reputation, and it became easier and easier. At the beginning, we were looking for some site,
It was out, right?
and now the municipality called us to get Bellastock on their territory because they know that it's a good territory marketing.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have also to know about that that aspect. And the second question, Bellastock, is like Belle is coming from Belleville, which is the district where we born in Paris, and stock like stock of matter.
Okay.
Other question? Yeah.
Martha talked a lot about like being sustainable on the financial side. How do you manage? Like, where does the funding come from?
So we changed a lot during the question for the one in the back. What is the financial model and the economic model of Bellastock? So we start with the festival, and it was lots of subventions. So it was money from the government, the French government, and from the architecture school. It still are. The festival is 70% financial by the government and the architecture school, but we developed the other part, which is reuse expertise. So now we have a lot of contract to follow some demolition and to transform it in the construction. And I have to say, like 5 years ago, it was a twist. So at the early beginning of Bellastock, it was 80% subvention, 20% from our own, and now we just change, which is more comfortable. If there is any problem, we have our own economy, so we just transform it. Yeah.
Do you work sometimes for like private client, or do you only work by yourself, like you are proposing project and project collectivity, like the festival?
No, we have. So the question is, do you have a private client? Most of our projects are private clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The festival is the only one which is auto-motivated. But then, no, we just worked with all the really huge, beautiful.
And so they're asking you for your expertise, or you find them?
No, they find us because the repart, which is the research, it put like Bellastock like in the front page of reusing in France. So now the phone is ringing every day, and we just grow like it's one employee by year. So we try to get an evolution like sustainable, following the. But we don't want to grow too fast because then we can't keep the. It's important for us to make the most horizontal we can in our group, to don't make the pyramidal system, which can change a lot your philosophy or the way you're working with people. So we grow, but little by little, but we have more and more private clients. Thanks. Other questions? Yeah.
For the training that you have before the festival, is it all like conferences in a local space, or do you have some online for like international?
Yeah. We are, since 2 years, we try tutorial, like the tuto. So we make lecture. Then, for example, for the straw one, we went to the guy who gives us the straw, and we did a kind of tuto. And just it's because it's really, at the beginning we were doing some paper information, but nobody is reading it. So we changed to make some tutorial.
Tenu par 2 ficelles, ses dimensions sont 37 par 47 par 1,20 m. Des 2 éléments pour pouvoir la transporter de manière sereine. Et la question de l'humidité. Quand vous arriverez sur le site, toutes vos bottes seront couvertes. Vous faites votre chantier, vous couvrez votre abri, et quand vous reconditionnez les éléments, veillez à toujours les abriter de la pluie.
And do the people who come to the festival have like some kind of background, or like?
No, it's completely open. Most of the participants, they come from architecture school, and it's also open to everybody. So we already get philosophers, social workers, people from other disciplines who came to the festival. Yeah.
I wonder, what's your approach to reuse with the project? So you said before that you, for example, for the building, you had to study which elements compose the structure,
Yeah.
and how they built it, and how you should demolish in order to do what you kind of thought of doing. But does that mean that you developed the project kind of before, and then you adapt with materials, or do the two things go together?
Yeah, I get the question. It's like between the two. It's like our first approach now is like we try to deconstruct building that they did. So it's like it's like our work is like looking on the project they did on 50s, 70s, 80s, and to learn about the building, to understand how they built it, to be able to deconstruct it. So that's our expertise for the moment. But of course, there is another part which is more research. It's about how to design today a building that can be deconstructed in 10, 20 years. So we are working on a discussion group to try to develop a new way of making building, which is more deconstructible. Did I answer? Yeah. So that's.
And it's a group just within Bellastock or within the different?
I know it's like with the cemetery syndicate, with the Vinci, Bouygues, lots of really marvelous firms we have in France, but it's important for Bellastock to also work with the huge group in France, because they are the people who build a lot. So it was the question during the moment. Should we just say, no, we don't want that sort of big company? Should we close the door and say we don't want to work with them? But it's like, we had a lot of discussion and say, okay, let's work with them and try to give a bit of information, and then they will contract us and blah blah blah. So you can give a bit of information to make them change, but you can't give all your expertise. It's complicated to explain in English, but it's like we have a lot of discussion in Bellastock to know which is the scale of information you give or not with who.
It's those different that impact you so that you come about to construct?
Yeah. They know that the construction world is changing, and if they want to don't arrive in 20 or 30 years like in a wall, they know that they have to begin to change their way of working. So they just have
Is it happening just in France, or are you getting calls from all over Europe or all over the world?
The problem is the law. So most of our work is working with the French law.
Okay.
So of course we are expert in French, but for example we have a project now with Rotor in Belgium and with some English guy, and we are working on the north of Europe how to develop the reusing expertise, and so we are making some bridges between the group, and the work is about we give the Bellastock tools to Rotor. Rotor give us their tools, we try it in our project, and we see which is the more efficient, and we make exchange of knowledge. So of course it's possible, but it's a bit hard with because the law is different in each country.
So what are the biggest barriers, regarding the law and policy? Like you said, it's right now it's just because of the French law, you know it, and it's moving the direction that it works to your benefit. But what is exactly moving in your benefit, or what are the barriers in other countries that block up what you want to do?
I'm not sure I get the question. What is complicated for us to manage in French with the law?
In France, you already you know how to work the system, no? More or less.
Just a little bit. As you can see, it's lots of public space. It's like floors, little wall, but we didn't make a building down with an old building. So still we have lots of work. We are at the first step. So then maybe we will help some European friends, but for the moment we have still lots of work at home. Yeah.
Have municipalities already contacted you? Like, is it only private, companies, or are you also working with municipalities in terms of, circular economy, maybe? And
We just started a project calling Métabolisme Urbain. It's like urban metabolism. It's in north of Paris, the place where we did ACLAB. The people, they really trust in our group, so they offer us the chance to manage a group which is in charge of analyzing 30 sites, 30 demolition sites, and to make the switch with the new construction on the site. Because if you do the analysis of the place, each year it's 40 million material going out for garbage, and 40 million of new material coming on the territory without creating any riches, any value. So the game of Bellastock is we keep the material on the site, we transform it, we rearrange, and we design it again with that product. And also we make formation for people, and we make employ, because of course reuse is not more expensive. It's just you take the money and you put it in another place. So that's our work. So of course municipality is the other scale, which is really interesting for us. It's like we can be on urban metabolism and not only on a project.
You have two questions. Do you see future for ArtLab with more open source for people to take it and do it yourself without being an architect or being able to without construction background, And the second question is what is your favorite material to reuse in a house, or what is the best for you?
So there were two questions. The first one is do we did a kind of manual for ACLAB to make people to repeat it? And the second question, what is the favorite material for Bellastock to reuse? So the first one, all our research, they are disponible. They are available on site on website. Like for example, the research of RIPA, you can charge it on ADEM, and the one I show you, the bike garage, is also a project we did with a financial from the La Caisse de Dépôt, Impuesto.
The tax
government friend. So all the process is accessible on the site, so you can charge it, then you can repeat it, download it, then you can repeat it. But I mean, there is not all the skills in the file.
But do you see that people like without construction background do it? Is it possible? You think, or is it just open to?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you don't have a builder background or architect background, it's possible, it can. But the good point of Bellastock is that there were a researcher, I'm more builder. There is all type of architect in the same group. So when one is developing the economic system, the other one is working with reusing. I don't know exactly which type of team you need to have to make a hack lab.
Yeah.
And after, the material we prefer is concrete, because we are building in concrete since 50 years in France, so that's the material we must find. So of course it's interesting to talk about a door, a window or wood, it's easier, but if we want to make the reuse really working with the massive stock, then it's concrete. I don't really like concrete more than other materials. Just if we want that reuse work with lots of amount of material, then concrete is the one.
Can you say a few words already about like the project you're working on right now? You mentioned yesterday about the 6 schools.
Yeah, we also, the Culture Ministry asked us to develop a scale 1, an experimental place for all the schools in Paris. So in Paris we have 6 schools of architecture. So half of the architecture students, they're in Paris. The other half is in the rest of France. But in Lyon, they already have an experimental place. It's called Grands Ateliers. But in Paris, they want to develop one. So they construct Bellastock to work about a place in Évry, which is the place where we will do the next festival. And Évry gave us a castle, a little castle. Oh. It's really a cheapy one, but it's French. Little tower, there is a huge window in the center. I know. And there is also a huge forest around it. So the game is like to refurbish the castle, and then there is lots of little construction around it where we can make future experimentation on scale 1:1, and the forest will be the place to experiment. So it's really cool now. Bellastock, I mean, the ministry is really trusting that Bellastock can develop a new way of learning architecture in school. And I imagine that's why you're here in critical concrete is for that. Like, of course, it's important the theoretical background, but to do by yourself, you learn lots of more. And the next time you make a line, you remember what that line means. Yeah. So, let's have a beer.